Bibles tonight, we're going to be in John chapter 4. And I've been spending a lot of time here lately looking at what Jesus taught his disciples. It seems that almost every incident that Jesus has with other people, afterwards, he pulls his disciples aside, and he's got something to tell them every time. And I've really been enjoying going through this. And we're going to be in John chapter 4. We're going to be focusing on 27 through 38 tonight. And as we get to this portion of Scripture, what's going on is, Jesus has already started his ministry, and John the Baptist has been telling people about Jesus. He's been saying that, this guy's a Christ. So, naturally, that's got people hot. And they just, this rumor mill, and there's this rumor going on about this Jesus guy. Well, and then Jesus shows up in Jerusalem. And he causes a bit of a stir. He cleans the temple out. And people are just amazed at the way Jesus is acting. And Jesus even has this secret meeting with one of the Jewish leaders, Nicodemus. So there's this big stir starting to go on within the Jewish community. And the Pharisees are starting to see this. And they're seeing this growing ministry about how he's becoming more popular than John the Baptist. You see, John the Baptist was kind of he didn't pose a great threat to the Pharisees. Because John the Baptist was, to simply stated, he says, I'm not the Messiah. I'm paving the way for it. He is on the way. You better get ready. And that's John's message to the Pharisees. That they can sit back and watch that and they'd be like, yeah, he's on the way. Whatever. And John's ministry didn't affect him that much. But Jesus came on the scene and he's like, I am the Messiah. Well, this upset the Pharisees a lot. So now, at this point, his fame is starting to grow, and the Pharisees, they're going to start making some problems for him. And they're going to start pushing him, testing him, and that's what they're looking to do. Well, the Passover feast and celebration's over, and it's time for Jesus to leave Jerusalem and go back home. So he does. He's heading back home to Galilee. And to get there, he's got to pass through Samaria. I mean, he could jump the river and walk around it. And if you know anything about Jewish society back then, they didn't talk to the Samaritans. They didn't have anything to do with them. And we're going to touch on that a little bit more here in a little bit. But here they are. They leave probably in the morning. And they've been walking all day out of Jerusalem. And it says they get into the region of Samaria, and they come to this city of Sychar, something like that. And they're tired of traveling. The Bible tells us that Jesus was weary. Now, so he sits down at this well and sends his disciples off for food. Now, as they head into town for food, Jesus is sitting there waiting, and here comes this woman. Now, we all know this story as the woman at the well. And here comes this Samaritan woman, and he strikes up a conversation with her. Well, about the time that Jesus wraps up this conversation with her, she's all excited, and she heads into town. She's going to tell everybody what's going on. And about that same time, the disciples get back from buying food. Now, this is where we're going to jump into the story here. And this is his conversation with his disciples. And each and every one of us, if we are following Jesus, we are a disciple. And so each time that Jesus sits down to teach his disciples, it's just like he's talking to you and me. This is something that he wants his disciples to know and understand. So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to start reading in verse 27. It says, at this point, his disciples came, and they marveled that he talked with a woman. Yet no one said, what do you seek, or why are you talking with her? Now, they were surprised he's talking to a woman. Now, it's not just any woman. Jesus would have talked to women. He talked to Mary, and he talked to Martha, and he talked to his mom, and he had nice sisters. He wasn't just chauvinist. He was Jewish. Now, the reason it's surprising that they say he was talking to a woman, he was talking to a Samaritan. See, the Jews didn't have any dealings with the Samaritans. They didn't want any dealings with the Samaritans. They were half-breeds and they worshipped in a different spot and they didn't do it right. So, it was odd for a Jewish man to have a conversation or any dealings with a Samaritan man, much less a Samaritan woman. There was just no call for that. So the disciples were like, what in the world is he talking about her for? What's going on here? And then it gets even better. In verse 28, it says the woman left her water pot and went away into the city and said to the men, come, see the man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ? Now, she was so excited from her conversation with Jesus, she just left her stuff. And he just took off. He's like, you gotta come check this guy out. Right? So, when the disciples see all the people coming, I mean, this lady just left, and all these people are coming out. It says she told them to come see. So Jesus is going to see all these Samaritan men coming across the field to see him. And he forgets he's hungry. Now remember, he sent the disciples in for food. But when he sees all these people coming in, he completely forgets he's hungry. And the disciples, on the other hand, they see all this happening, they're thinking, ooh, it's going to be a long night, we better eat something. We need to eat. And that's what we find as we go on further. In verse 30, he says, they went out of the city and came to him. And in the meantime, the disciples urged him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But this is Jesus' answer to him. Verse 32, he starts and he says, but he said to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. Therefore, the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him anything to eat? They're looking around, there's like, who brought him food? Did you go back from town? I mean, we had the money, and he's just been saying, who brought him food? What in the world's going on? But then Jesus says in verse 34, my food is to do the will of him who sent me, and to finish his work. Oh. Now, we learned a couple of different things from his answer here. The first thing we learned is that doing God's work is sustaining to our bodies. Now, if you look at it, Jesus calls his work his food, or his sustenance. This is what sustains him. It's his food. The second thing we find is Jesus reveals the importance of ministering to people when the opportunity presents itself. You'll notice that he didn't wait until he was all rested up to talk to the woman at the well. No, he was weary, he was thirsty, but he didn't let that opportunity pass him by. He didn't rest before he talked to her. Next thing we see that he didn't make everyone wait until he had finished eating. Now, if I'm hungry and I got something to do, I'm going to tell him, hold on, I'm almost done eating. No, Jesus didn't do that, did he? He saw the people coming, and he told the disciples to eat. You've got time to eat. Look at this. He said, I don't have time to eat. My Father will sustain me until there is time for rest. And that's exactly what he was trying to get his point across to them. Right there. Is I don't need food. My Father will sustain me as long as I'm doing his work. So it's important. Not only that, it's sustaining. Now, and he just doesn't want his disciples to waste any time, to waste the opportunities that are presented to them. And then he goes on, verse 35, he says, do you not say that there are still 4 months, and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are ripe for harvest. Now, this phrase, there are still 4 months till harvest. I did some looking up on it, and I did some reading on it, thought about it. It just means that we have plenty of time. There's no rush. So he's saying, all right, you're saying that there's no big hurry for this. But Jesus says, there's a rush. Look at it, the harvest is now. And we have I think we have lost the urgency of the harvest. I don't think that we fully understand what the urgency of the harvest means today. I mean, if you think about it, it's a big deal if it's your crop. But if it's not your crop, it's not a big deal if the harvest doesn't get in. I mean, if I want a banana, I know that City Market is going to send off somewhere to bring me a banana. I don't have to wait for the banana harvest. I know no matter what time of year it is, I know I'm going to have bananas. If my apple tree does not produce apples this year, it's really not that big of a deal to me. Why? Because I can go buy apples. They ship them in from Chile, Washington, all over the place. There's always apples. So we've lost this urgency of the harvest. And I think a lot of that is because of our machinery and our technology. I mean, if you think about it, one guy in a John Deere combine and a semi can wipe out a whole wheat field in an afternoon. It's not that big of a deal anymore. When I was a kid, harvest was my favorite time of the year. Now, I grew up in eastern Colorado, and I'm a fourth generation wheat farmer, only I never became a wheat farmer. But my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, all wheat farmers. And I loved harvest time, because harvest time meant so much. In fact, harvest time, or 4th of July for us out there, was when we were cutting wheat, right around the 4th of July. And that was my favorite holiday. 4th of July, for me, has got Christmas beat hands down. And I tell you what, well, first of all, it's warm. I'm not good with cold. But we would plan this, that no matter where we were, no matter where my parents were living, we lived in Colorado Springs, we lived down in Trinidad, we lived at Cove, we lived all over the place. But no matter where we were, come harvest time, we went home. And it wasn't just us, but my Uncle Chris and my Uncle Gail and all my cousins and the whole family would come together. And we would spend a week and a half cutting wheat. Now, we had really old machines and it shouldn't have taken us that long, but when you're running a 16-foot header, it takes a long time. But it was amazing that no matter what was going on in our lives, we dropped everything. We planned for this all year long. We missed Thanksgiving a few times. Never missed harvest. So harvest not only was extremely important, especially for my grandparents, because that was their livelihood, but it became extremely important for me because that was my time, that was my family time. And that was the fun time. I mean, that's where I learned to drive. 41 International in the middle of a wheat field. That's a great place to teach kids to drive. And all the grandkids had to learn on the 41 International. So Grandpa said, if you can drive that, you can drive anything. But some of my greatest memories are from harvest. When we'd sit, as kids, we'd sit in the back of the wheat truck and just chew on gum, chew on wheat. We were always told if you chew it long enough, it turns into gum. It doesn't. It turns into a big blob of stuff you can't chew anymore. It's not gum. But it was amazing. And when I got old enough, I got to drive the combine, which is quite an experience when you don't have a cab and none of that other stuff. I was spoiled in high school, though. I worked for a guy who had a combine. And in fact, corn harvest came, they let out school. Anyway, there was 5 days a week. Didn't matter. You didn't have to go to school if there's corn harvest. So corn harvest was my second favorite for that reason. But in Jesus' time, it would have been even bigger. I mean, if you think about this, they had sickles and seeds, or whatever those things are called. Scythes, yeah. Big blade on a big stick, they go chop it. I mean, they would strip the plant and they'd put it in this little pouch that they carried around with them. This is how they harvested. Now, how many people would it take to harvest a wheat field? It'd take all of us. It took the entire community to go to harvest. It was hugely important event. You didn't miss it. When it was harvest time, you dropped everything you were doing and you went to the field. Why? Because if you didn't, you didn't eat. And eating is very important. Trust me. Wade will tell you all about it. That's right. No. So, harvest. We need to get this idea of harvest as the most important time of the year. As the most important event that you will do all year long. It's more important than Christmas. It's more important than your birthday. I know that's hard to believe, but harvest is the one event, the one time of year that you did not miss. Everybody participated. Now in harvest, we all have different jobs. When I was younger, I learned to drive a truck. And we drive from the field to the grain bin. And then when I got a little older, they put me on the combine. So I would just drive around in circles. Then when I got even older and got my license, they would fill up the truck and send me to town. And see, my job, it changed, but we all had different jobs. We have combine drivers, and we have truck drivers, and we have mechanics, and whatever it is that you're doing, we all have these different jobs. And that's what Jesus tells us next in verse 36. Look at this. He says, and he who reaps or receives wages and gathers fruit for eternal life, that both he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this the same is true. One sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap for that which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labors. Now, we each have our own job to do, but we're in this all together. My grandpa, every year, every fall, he would go out and he'd plant. He'd spend all summer, he'd be just in summer follow and getting the ground ready. Fall came, he'd go plant. See, I never planted. Grandpa did all that. I would help with the harvest. So, but our goal was the same. A profitable harvest. Our goal was to get the crop out of the field. And even though he planted and I cut it, our goal was the same. And when the harvest was complete, we celebrated. Now, if harvest was just perfect, it would end. We would get done cutting wheat on July 4th and then we would watch fireworks. That was our celebration. But even when harvest ended, we would all spend a couple days just sitting around and enjoying each other's company. Getting to know each other all over again. You know, I have cousins that lived in South Carolina. It was the only time of the year I ever got snow. And so we celebrated each other. And that's what it's all about. When the crop comes in, we celebrate. It was a really big deal. And, well, not only that, Grandpa paid us. We like that a lot. Well, look at verse 38, the first half where he says, I sent you to reap for that which you had not labored. He says, I sent you. Now this is past tense. He sent. He already did. So I want us to take a look at when Jesus first sent them. Because oddly enough, in that, when he sent them out, he used the example of the harvest. So we're going to end in Matthew chapter 9. And we're going to be starting, I'm going to read 35 through 38, and then I'm going to jump over to verse 10 and read a couple of verses just to finish that out. But Matthew chapter 9, in verse 35, it says, when Jesus went all about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel to the kingdom and the healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered like sheep having no shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, and it's another one that he's teaching the disciples things, the harvest is truly plentiful, but the laborers laborers are few. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Chapter 10 starts and he says, and when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits, to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sicknesses and all kinds of disease. And then these 12, Jesus sent out. Wow. He compared it once again to the harvest. Now, what he's telling his disciples is now is the time. He's saying, look, now is the time for harvest. We can't stop putting it off. That's not what we're here to do. We are here to harvest the crop. Now, the events in our world and just our life in general right now, as we look around at the state of our country and of our world, harvest seems like it's the furthest state. You know, I can watch the news and think, still got 4 months to harvest. But that's not really what's going on. I mean, if you look or take a closer look past all the bad news. But there are people that are creating religions out of nothing. There are so many religions out there right now. And they may be too numerous to count. And these people, they're bouncing from one to another. And they don't seem to be working for them. So they combine them. I'm going to take some of this religion, and I'm going to take some of this religion, and I'm going to put this religion, and that looks like something that will work for me. We're getting a lot of that. You see, people are confused, but they're hungry. They're searching. And when people are looking for something, that means the harvest is ready. They're seriously thinking about religion, about spiritual things. I mean, it's hard to deny that there's something else out there when everybody seems to believe there is. But they don't know what it is. They're confused. And why are they so confused about it? You know, they're searching for truth, is what they're looking for. Yeah. They're not really looking for something that's going to butter them up and make them feel good about themselves. I mean, that's always nice. But the bottom line is they keep jumping around because they're searching for truth and they can't find it. They can't find what's real. So how do we harvest? I mean, it'd probably make a pretty good movie, jumping Cowboy and start running into people, but I don't think it's going to work. We've got to use the same tools as what Jesus used. Look at this. He says he had compassion on them. Oh. He was moved with compassion for them because they were weary and scattered like sheep, having no shepherd. Most people out in our world are weary, and they're scattered like sheep with no shelter. Or shepherd. But the point is Jesus had compassion on them. And those are the tools that we have to use. He saw that they were lost and confused, and he loved them. He took each and every one of them just as they were. All these Samaritan men were coming down the hillside. He didn't stop and pick them out and tell them that, you weren't dressed correct for church, and no. He took each and every one of them right as they were. He accepted them. But more than that, he was real. You see, Jesus loved them. He had compassion on them. But he didn't butter them up. He told them the truth. And he lived it. And that's how we harvest. As we present the truth. Not necessarily by the words that we're saying, but by the way that we live. We have to live it. If you want people to know that you're authentic and you're real, and that the way that you are living is the way that they ought to try, then you have to be real about it. You can't be a hypocrite. I mean, all through the New Testament, as we're studying the youth group, We had 2 lessons on Jesus dealing with hypocrites. I mean, he straight out calls the Pharisees and the scribes and these Jewish leaders. He calls them, you hypocrite, you hypocrite, you hypocrite. In the first part of Romans, Paul tells us that people blaspheme the gospel because of us. Because we present it in a false way, or we present it and that we don't live it. So to harvest, all we have to do is be real. We have to have the compassion and the love. We got to be truthful. And when the people start to see this, I'm telling you what, you don't have to go chase down the harvest, it'll come to you. Jesus didn't go out searching for the harvest. He struck up a conversation. He was real with one person. And the harvest came to him. So if you're being real in your life for Christ, God's going to provide you opportunity